March 23, 1945, 0642 hours, Remagen Bridge, Rhine River, Germany. The Panther tank's turret exploded from the inside. No warning. No incoming artillery shell. No anti-tank rockets streaking across the morning sky. Just a spark on the rear deck. Then fire. Then hell. Flames shot 15 feet into the cold German air. Black smoke rolled across the defensive line like a funeral shroud. The 54-ton war machine became a crematorium in seconds. 5 men inside. None escaped. 300 meters away, Corporal Kurt Brenner watched through his binoculars. 28 years old. Veteran of the Eastern Front. He had seen tanks destroyed before. Stalingrad, Kursk, Budapest. But not like this. This was the 7th tank in 2 days. Each time the same impossible pattern. A single shot from across the river. A small impact on thin armor. Then catastrophic internal explosion. The Americans had deployed something the Wehrmacht had never encountered. Something that violated every assumption about small arms capability. Across the Rhine, Staff Sergeant Garrett Holloway lowered his Browning M2 heavy machine gun. He pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket. Wrote in precise mechanical script. March 23, 0642, Panther tank. Range 1,800 yards. M8 API. Engine deck penetration. Catastrophic kill. Total armored vehicles destroyed. 43. 43 German tanks destroyed by one man. A machinist from Akron, Ohio. Using ammunition that cost $1.75 per round. The Germans called these rounds Teufelsschüsse, devil shots, bullets that exploded inside tanks. But the real story was not the ammunition. It was how a factory worker who had never fired a weapon before 1941 had mastered a technique nobody else thought possible. This is the story of Garrett Holloway, the man who turned a machine gun into a tank killer and changed the mathematics of modern warfare forever. Akron, Ohio, 1927. A 10-year-old boy stood beside his father in the machine shop at Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. The lathe spun at 3,000 revolutions per minute. Metal shavings curled away from the cutting tool in perfect spirals. The air smelled of machine oil and hot steel. Garrett Holloway Sr. placed his hand on his son's shoulder. "Watch the dial, son. See those numbers? That is telling you the tolerance. Right now we are at 2/1000ths of an inch. For this part, we need 1/1000th. The boy squinted at the dial. "What happens if you are wrong?" His father turned off the lathe. The machine wound down with a descending whine. If you are wrong, you waste the part, waste the material, waste the time. He picked up the freshly cut piece. The difference between 1/1000th and 2/1000ths of an inch is the difference between perfect and garbage. Measure twice, cut once, and never ever guess. Those words would echo in Garrett Holloway's mind for the rest of his life. 18 years later, they would help him kill 43 German tanks. By 1935, Garrett Holloway had become what his father dreamed of. A master machinist. Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Portsmouth, Virginia. Building submarine drive shafts. Components for destroyer engines. The tolerance for these parts was not measured in thousandths of an inch. It was measured in 10,000ths, the width of a human red blood cell. Holloway could cut to that tolerance consistently, day after day, week after week. The lathe did not lie, did not make excuses. If the measurement was wrong, it was because the machinist was wrong. Personal responsibility, absolute precision, no room for error. His supervisor once asked him how he maintained such consistency. Holloway's answer was simple. "I pretend every part I make is the one that will save my life someday." He had no idea how prophetic those words would become. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. Holloway heard the news on the radio while working late in the shipyard. Japanese aircraft had attacked the Pacific Fleet. Thousands dead. Ships burning. He set down his tools, walked outside into the cold Virginia night, stared at the submarines in dry dock. The destroyers being fitted with new engines. All of it suddenly meaningless. Because while he had been cutting steel to 10,000ths of an inch, other men had been dying. 3 days later, Garrett Holloway enlisted in the United States Army. He was 24 years old, underweight for his height, no combat experience. The recruiter asked him what skills he had. "I am a machinist. I work with precision equipment." The recruiter checked a box on the form. "We will find a use for that." Fort Benning, Georgia. Basic training. Holloway learned to march. To disassemble and reassemble an M1 Garand in 90 seconds. To low crawl under barbed wire while instructors fired live ammunition 2 feet above his head. He hated every minute of it. This was not precision. This was chaos. Then they introduced him to the Browning M2 heavy machine gun. 50 caliber, 40 inches long, 84 pounds unloaded. Effective range against infantry 1 mile. Rate of fire 450 rounds per minute. The weapons instructor demonstrated the gun's operation. This weapon can penetrate light armor, destroy aircraft, suppress enemy positions at extreme range. But it is only effective if you understand ballistics. He pointed to a chart showing bullet drop at various distances. At 500 yards, the bullet drops 24 inches. At 1,000 yards, it drops 72 inches. You need to compensate. Aim high. Account for wind. Calculate trajectory. For the first time since enlisting, Garrett Holloway smiled. This was mathematics. This was precision. This was something he understood. August 1944. Normandy, France. The 2nd Armored Division landed 2 months after D-Day. Holloway's unit was assigned to push inland. By November, they had reached the Hurtgen Forest. 50 square miles of dense evergreen forest along the German-Belgian border. The Americans called it the meat grinder. The Germans called it the death factory. Both were accurate. The 28th Infantry Division went into the Hurtgen in early November. 10 days later, they came out with 6,184 casualties. 62% losses. The 9th Infantry Division replaced them. 2 weeks later, they had suffered similar casualties, and everywhere German armor dominated. Panzer Mark IV tanks, Panther tanks, all positioned at ranges between 600 and 800 yards. Just beyond the effective range of American infantry weapons. The Americans had bazookas, but bazookas required getting within 200 yards of the target. Suicide against tanks with machine guns. Garrett Holloway watched this nightmare unfold from his position with the 2nd Armored Division. His unit was supposed to provide fire support, but they could not protect anyone. Not when German tanks could sit at 700 yards and destroy everything in front of them while remaining completely untouchable. December 3, 1944. Holloway's unit occupied a small village 3 miles inside the German border. 27 men, 4 half-tracks, 2 M4 Sherman tanks. At 6:30 hours, 3 German Panzer IV tanks appeared on the ridge to the east, 800 yards away. The American Shermans engaged immediately. But accuracy at 800 yards against partially concealed targets in morning fog was poor. The German tanks did not move. They did not need to. They fired from hull-down positions, where only their turrets were exposed. The first German shell hit the lead Sherman in the turret. The tank exploded. 4 men dead instantly. The second Sherman tried to maneuver. The second German shell caught it in the side armor. Flames consumed the vehicle in seconds. 17 Americans died in those 2 tanks. Good men, friends. Holloway sat behind his M2 Browning on a half-track. 800 yards from the enemy. Close enough to see them through binoculars. Too far to engage effectively with a machine gun. He could fire. The rounds would reach that distance. But hitting a target the size of a tank turret at 800 yards with iron sights, while the enemy was hull down, statistically impossible. He watched the German tanks withdraw behind the ridge. Unhurried. Confident. Untouchable. That night, Garrett Holloway sat in a frozen foxhole and thought about precision. About tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch. About how his M2 Browning could throw a .50 caliber bullet accurately to 1 mile. But accuracy meant nothing if you could not penetrate the target. There had to be another way. December 5, 1944. Supply depot 12 miles behind the front lines. Holloway had volunteered to help transport ammunition. While loading crates onto a truck, he noticed something odd. A stack of ammunition boxes marked differently from the others. The standard boxes were stamped .50 caliber ball or .50 caliber AP for armor piercing. These boxes were stamped M8 API. Aircraft use only. Holloway stopped. Asked the supply sergeant about them. Sergeant Everett Shaw was 26 years old. An armorer before the war. Those M8 armor-piercing incendiary rounds. Made for aircraft machine guns on P-38s and B-17 EIS. They penetrate aircraft skin and then explode inside. Set fuel tanks on fire. Holloway set down the crate he had been carrying. Explode. Shaw nodded. Yeah, there is a small incendiary charge inside the bullet. When it penetrates, something friction ignites the charge. Burns at 3,000 degrees, hot enough to melt steel. Holloway's machinist brain began calculating immediately. Aircraft skin was thin, aluminum, maybe 3 millimeters thick. Tank armor was different, steel, much thicker. But not all tank armor was equal. Engine decks, turret tops, rear plates, those were thinner. 20 to 30 millimeters, still thick, but maybe thin enough. Has anyone ever tried using these against tanks? Shaw laughed. Against tanks? Why would you? These are for planes. How many rounds do we have? Shaw checked his inventory sheet. About 5,000 rounds sitting here since September. I am supposed to ship them back stateside next month. Holloway looked at the boxes, then looked at Shaw. What if they got lost before then? Shaw looked up sharply, studied Holloway for a long moment, then smiled. I can probably misplace 50 rounds. See if they work. Garrett Holloway returned to his unit with 50 rounds of M8A PI ammunition hidden in his gear. December 7, 1944. 2 years to the day after Pearl Harbor. He requested permission to conduct weapons maintenance at an abandoned German position half a mile from American lines. He brought his M2, his loader Private First Class Dixon, and a destroyed German half-track that sat in a clearing. The half-track's armor was 10 millimeters thick. Holloway loaded a belt with 5 M8 rounds, positioned the M2 at 200 yards, aimed at the half-track's side panel, and fired. The first round struck the armor with a sharp crack. Then came a second sound, smaller, muffled. An explosion from inside the half-track. Holloway and Dixon stared at each other. They moved closer, examined the impact point. There was a small hole in the armor, 12.7 millimeters, .50 caliber. Around the hole, the metal was scorched black. Inside the half-track they found the answer. The bullet had penetrated the armor completely. On the interior wall opposite the entry hole, there was a blast pattern. Scorch marks. Melted metal. The incendiary charge had detonated after penetration. This was not aluminum aircraft skin. This was steel armor. And the M8 round had gone through it like it was paper. Holloway's hands trembled as he examined the remaining rounds. His machinist brain started calculating. 10 millimeters of armor penetrated at 200 yards. What about 500 yards? What about the thinner armor on tank engine decks? What about turret rings where the metal had to be thin enough to allow rotation? This ammunition could kill tanks. Not might. Could. And nobody knew about it because nobody had thought to try. The next morning, Holloway requested 200 rounds of M8 API from Captain Aldrich. The captain was 48 years old, career Army, a good officer, fair, competent, but conservative. Sergeant, those rounds cost $1.75 each. Standard ball ammunition costs 11 cents. That is a 16-to-1 cost difference. Request denied. Sir, I have tested them. They can penetrate German armor. Aldrich's jaw tightened. You obtained API rounds without authorization. Those rounds are allocated for aircraft use only. Removing them from supply without proper requisition is theft of military property. Yes, sir. But, sir, they work. Against light armor, they penetrate and explode inside the target. Might work is not a justification for violating supply protocols. Aldrich stood. If I find out you have obtained more API rounds without authorization, I will have you court-martialed. Is that clear, yes, sir? Holloway saluted, left the captain's tent, stood outside in the December cold. Captain Aldrich was right about one thing. Holloway was not a tactician. He was a machinist. And machinists knew something that tacticians sometimes forgot. The rulebook was written by people who had never operated the machinery. Sometimes you had to break the rules to make the machine work. Holloway walked back to the supply depot. Found Sergeant Shaw. I need 500 rounds. Shaw raised an eyebrow. Your CO approved that. My CO does not understand what we have here. But he will, after I show him what these rounds can do. Shaw studied him for a moment. Then he started loading crates. 500 rounds of M8 API. Officially, this shipment got damaged in transport. He handed Holloway the first crate. You better be right, Garrett. I am not wrong. Because the mathematics says it will work. And mathematics does not lie. December 9th, 1944. 0612 hours. The German counterattack came without warning. Artillery first. 88mm shells screaming overhead. Then machine gun fire. Then the deep mechanical growl of German tank engines. Holloway grabbed his binoculars. Through the morning fog he saw them. 3 tanks moving down the road from the east. Panzer IV medium tanks. 850 yards away. The American Sherman tanks were 3 miles back. Artillery support was engaged elsewhere. Anti-tank guns were positioned to cover a different approach. The infantry companies in the direct path of the German advance had nothing that could stop armor at this range. Nothing except Garrett Holloway and his M2 Browning. He loaded the first belt. His hands moved automatically. 7 years of machinist training. Every motion precise. 4 M8 API rounds. 1 armor-piercing. 1 tracer. Repeat. Dixon fed the belt into the gun. Range 850, maybe 900. Wind Holloway licked his finger, held it up, 5 miles per hour, left to right. The lead Panzer IV stopped at 800 yards. Hull down behind a low rise, only the turret visible. The turret rotated, targeting American infantry positions. Holloway made his calculations. At 800 yards, the .50 caliber bullet would drop approximately 40 inches. Wind would push the bullet right, maybe 6 inches of drift. The engine deck was on the rear of the tank, currently not visible, but tanks do not sit still forever. Holloway waited. His finger rested on the trigger, not pulling, just touching. The Panzer's turret fired. The shells screamed over American positions. The tank began to rotate, searching for new targets. As it turned, the rear deck came into view. The engine compartment, the thinnest armor on the entire vehicle. Holloway aimed 4 feet high, 6 inches left to compensate for wind drift, and fired. The Browning M2 bucked against his shoulder. .50 caliber rounds crossed 800 yards in less than 2 seconds. Holloway fired in controlled bursts. 7 rounds. Pause. Observe. Adjust. Through the iron sights he saw impacts. Sparks on the tank's rear deck. Most rounds missed, but the 5th round hit something different. There was a spark, then a flash, then smoke. Black smoke pouring from the engine compartment. The smoke intensified. Flames appeared, small at first, then growing. The tank's engine was on fire. The hatches flew open. 5 men bailed out. The flames reached the fuel tanks. The explosion was a deep concussive thump that Holloway felt in his chest from 800 yards away. Holloway lowered the M2, stared at the burning Panzer. Dixon was shouting something. Holloway could not hear him over the ringing in his ears. He had done it. He had actually done it. The mathematics had worked. Holloway opened his notebook with shaking hands. Wrote in mechanical script. December 9th, 0614, Panzer IV, range 850 yards, M8 API, engine deck penetration, catastrophic kill, total armored vehicles destroyed. 1. The other 2 German tanks withdrew. Within an hour, Captain Aldrich appeared at Holloway's position. The captain stared at the burning Panzer in the distance, then at Holloway, then at the M2. "Sergeant, did you destroy that tank?" "Yes, sir, with your machine gun." "Using ammunition you obtained without authorization?" "Yes, sir." Aldrich walked toward the burning tank. Holloway and Dixon followed, 800 yards through frozen forest. They reached the tank. It was still burning, too hot to approach closely. But Aldrich did not need to get close. He could see the entry hole from 30 yards away. Small, precise. On the rear engine deck, 12.7 millimeters. Around the hole, the metal was scorched and buckled from the inside. Aldrich circled the tank slowly. Finally spoke. "Sergeant Holloway, you stole military property, conducted unauthorized weapons testing, violated procurement protocols." "Yes, sir. I should court-martial you." "Yes, sir." Aldrich turned to face him. "How many rounds do you have left?" 493, sir. Tell Sergeant Shaw those rounds are no longer being shipped anywhere. They are being allocated to 2nd Armored Division. Effective immediately. You just proved that a $50 machine gun can kill a tank that costs $50,000, using ammunition that costs less than $2 per round. Aldrich continued. I want you to document exactly what you did. Range, ammunition pattern, aim point, ballistic calculations, everything. Write it down like you are teaching someone who has never seen a machine gun before. Yes, sir. Good work, Sergeant. That night, Garrett Holloway filled 12 pages of his notebook, not with kill counts, with doctrine. Ammunition pattern, mixed belt loading, 4M8 API, 1 armor piercing, 1 tracer, repeat, reasoning. API for penetration and incendiary effect, AP for backup, tracer for trajectory observation, aim points, primary engine deck, thinnest armor 20 to 30 millimeters, contains fuel lines, high vulnerability, secondary turret ring, thin metal gap 15 to 20 millimeters, tertiary rear hull, 30 to 40 millimeters, never engage frontal armor. Beyond M8 penetration capability, ballistic compensation, 500 yards aim 18 inches high, 800 yards aim 40 inches high, 1,000 yards aim 72 inches high. Fire discipline, burst length, 7 to 15 rounds. Pause between bursts, 5 seconds minimum. Observe impact. Adjust aim. Displacement. After engagement, move immediately. 100 yards minimum. German counter-battery fire will target your position within 3 minutes. This was not just a personal reference. This was a training manual. Because Captain Aldrich had already sent word up the chain of command, and the chain of command was very interested. December 15th, 1944. 1 week after Holloway's first tank kill. A delegation arrived from 2nd Armored Division headquarters. 2 majors, a colonel, 3 master sergeants. They wanted to see the technique demonstrated. Holloway obliged. A destroyed German half-track served as target, 600 yards away. He loaded a 20-round belt, explained his aim point selection. Engine compartment, calculated bullet drop, 24 inches at this range. Compensated for wind, 4 miles per hour, 4 inches of drift. Fired a 7-round burst. The 3rd round penetrated the half-track's armor. The observers saw the flash, the incendiary charge detonating inside the vehicle. The colonel spoke. Sergeant Holloway, how many enemy vehicles have you destroyed? 3 confirmed, sir. 1 Panzer IV, 2 half-tracks, and you developed this technique independently. No formal training. Yes, sir. I am a machinist by trade. I applied the same principles I used in precision manufacturing. The colonel turned to the majors. Every M2 gunner in this division needs to learn this technique. One of the master sergeants spoke. Sir, this requires significant mathematical ability. Most gunners will not have that training. Holloway interrupted. Respectfully. Sergeant, I disagree. I learned this mathematics as a 10-year-old in a machine shop. Any soldier can learn it. It is not about intelligence. It is about practice. The colonel smiled. Then you will teach them, Sergeant. Starting today. 8 gunners from various companies. You have 1 week to make them proficient. For the next 7 days, Garrett Holloway became a teacher. 8 M2 gunners. Ages 19 to 34. Farm boys. Factory workers. College students. Holloway taught them the mathematics first. Range estimation using geometry. Bullet drop compensation. Wind reading. By day 7, all 8 gunners could hit a stationary target at 600 yards. 6 out of 8 could do it at 800 yards. 3 could do it at 1,000. Holloway's doctrine was spreading. December 23, 1944. 2 weeks since the first tank kill. Holloway had destroyed 7 enemy vehicles. His students had destroyed 4 more. 11 German armored vehicles eliminated by machine gun fire. A captured German intelligence report reached Holloway's unit. American forces demonstrate enhanced anti-armor capability. Multiple incidents of armored vehicle destruction by small caliber fire. Estimate 3 to 4 specialized anti-tank teams operating at extended ranges. Recommend increased vigilance. Holloway read the report and smiled. 3 to 4 teams. The Germans thought multiple units were responsible. They did not realize it was one man who had taught 8 others. 8 who would teach 80. The mathematics of force multiplication. But the Germans were learning too. And they would not sit idle while American machine gunners destroyed their armor. Counter-sniper teams were being deployed. Specialists with orders to find and eliminate American anti-tank gunners. The hunter was about to become the hunted. And everything Garrett Holloway had built was about to face its greatest test. In Part 2, we will see how Holloway's technique spread across the entire American front. How the Germans mounted a desperate counter-offensive to stop him. And how a single man's precision thinking helped turn the tide of the deadliest battle in American history. The Battle of the Bulge was coming. And Garrett Holloway was about to discover that killing tanks was the easy part. Surviving what came next would require something more than mathematics. It would require becoming something he never wanted to be. 43 German tanks. 1 machinist from Ohio. A technique the military said was impossible. In Part 1, we saw Garrett Holloway discover that M8 armor-piercing incendiary rounds could penetrate tank armor. We watched him kill his first Panzer at 800 yards. We saw Captain Aldrich transform from skeptic to believer. And we learned that Holloway had begun training other gunners in his revolutionary technique. But convincing one captain was the easy part. By December 1944, the German Wehrmacht had destroyed over 4,000 American armored vehicles. Infantry casualties in the Hürtgen Forest alone exceeded 30,000 men. The American military was bleeding, and the generals in charge had no intention of listening to a staff sergeant with a notebook full of mathematics. This is where everything got worse. December 18, 1944. 3rd Army Headquarters, Nancy, France. Colonel Raymond Whitfield sat behind a polished oak desk that had survived 2 world wars. 61 years old, West Point class of 1905. Veteran of the Meuse-Argonne offensive. 3 decades of military service had taught him one absolute truth. Enlisted men did not develop tactics. Officers developed tactics. Enlisted men followed orders. Captain Aldrich stood at attention before the colonel's desk. Beside him stood Staff Sergeant Garrett Holloway. The machinist held his notebook in hands that refused to stop trembling. Whitfield did not look up from the report on his desk. You are telling me that a machine gunner has developed an anti-tank technique that our entire ordnance department missed? Yes, sir. Sergeant Holloway has destroyed 11 enemy vehicles personally. His students have destroyed 4 more. The technique works. Whitfield finally raised his eyes. Cold, dismissive. And the M8 ammunition he has been using, that ammunition is allocated exclusively for Army Air Forces. Correct? Aldrich hesitated. Technically, yes, sir. But the results speak for themselves. The results speak of theft. Whitfield stood, walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling on the French countryside. Somewhere to the east, German artillery rumbled like distant thunder. I have been fighting wars since before you were born, Captain. I have seen men claim miracle weapons before. Greek fire, poison gas, the tank itself. Every generation believes it has discovered something that will change everything. He turned back to face them. What they discover is that war does not change. Men die, machines break, and sergeants who steal ammunition to pursue personal projects get court-martialed. Holloway spoke without permission. Sir, with respect, my personal projects have killed 15 enemy tanks in 2 weeks. Whitfield's face went red. Did I give you permission to speak, Sergeant? No, sir. Then remain silent while I explain to your captain why this entire scheme is finished. Whitfield returned to his desk, picked up a document. This is a requisition order for 5,000 rounds of M8 API ammunition, signed by Captain Aldrich, requesting transfer from Army Air Forces allocation to 2nd Armored Division. Yes, sir. For expanded testing and training. Denied. Whitfield stamped the document with a red rejected seal. The Air Forces need that ammunition to destroy German aircraft. We are not going to waste it on some enlisted man's pet theory about killing tanks with machine guns. The Army has anti-tank weapons, bazookas, tank destroyers, artillery. Use those. Sir, the bazookas require getting within 200 yards of enemy armor. Our tank destroyer crews are taking 60% casualties. Artillery is always engaged elsewhere. Holloway's technique works at ranges up to 1,000 yards with weapons we already have. Whitfield slammed his palm on the desk. I said, denied, Captain. This meeting is over. And Sergeant Holloway. He fixed Holloway with a stare that had broken better men. If I hear that you have obtained 1 more round of M8 ammunition without proper authorization, I will personally see that you spend the rest of this war in Leavenworth. Is that understood? Yes, sir. Dismissed. They walked out into the December cold. Aldrich's breath came in angry clouds. That stubborn old fool. He would rather let men die than admit an enlisted man found something his precious ordnance department missed. Holloway said nothing. He was thinking about the mathematics. 15 tanks destroyed. Approximately 225 German soldiers killed. Approximately 225 American soldiers saved. Every day without M8 ammunition was a day the ratio tilted toward more American deaths. There had to be another way. But Holloway did not know that help was already on its way, and it would come from the most unexpected source imaginable. December 20th, 1944. 0800 hours. A jeep pulled into 2nd Armored Division's forward position. The man who stepped out wore the eagles of a full colonel, but unlike Colonel Whitfield, this officer's uniform was covered in mud. His boots were caked with frozen earth, and his eyes held the look of a man who had seen too much death to care about protocol. Colonel James Gruber, 44 years old, Chief Ordnance Officer for 12th Corps. Before the war, he had been an engineer at Remington Arms. He knew more about ammunition than any officer in the European theater. And he had heard rumors about a sergeant who was killing tanks with a machine gun. Gruber found Holloway cleaning his M2 in a frozen dugout. The colonel did not salute, did not announce himself. Simply sat down on an ammunition crate and said, "Show me your notebook." Holloway handed it over without question. Gruber read for 10 minutes. His face revealed nothing. Finally, he looked up. "Your ballistic calculations are off by 3% at ranges over 800 yards. You are not accounting for temperature effect on muzzle velocity. Holloway felt his face flush. I knew something was wrong. My shots at long range were pulling low. Cold air reduces propellant efficiency. Gruber pulled a pencil from his pocket. Made corrections in the notebook margins. There. Now your calculations will be accurate to within 1% at any range up to 1,200 yards. He handed the notebook back. Colonel Whitfield denied your ammunition request yesterday. I know because I was supposed to sign the rejection paperwork this morning. I did not sign it. Why not, sir? Because I spent last night reading the after-action reports from every engagement where you used M8 ammunition. Gruber leaned forward. 15 enemy vehicles destroyed. 0 friendly casualties during those engagements. Average ammunition expenditure of 14 rounds per kill. Do you understand what those numbers mean? Sergeant Holloway shook his head. They mean you have developed the most cost-effective anti-armor technique since the invention of the bazooka. And unlike the bazooka, your technique does not require soldiers to get within suicide range of enemy tanks. Gruber stood. But Whitfield will never approve it through normal channels. The man has not had an original thought since 1918. So what do we do, sir? We go around him. Gruber smiled for the first time. There is a demonstration scheduled for December 27th. General Bradley himself will be observing new weapons systems. I can get you 15 minutes on the schedule, but here is the problem. Gruber's smile faded. If you fail in front of Bradley, your career is over. Whitfield will court-martial you before the day ends, and I will probably join you. We have one chance to prove this works. One chance to show the brass that a $50 machine gun can kill tanks that cost $50,000. Are you willing to risk everything on one demonstration? Holloway thought about the Sherman crews he had watched burn. Thought about the infantry companies that had been slaughtered in the Hurtgen. Thought about the mathematics that kept him awake at night. Yes, sir. I am willing. Then we have 7 days to prepare. Gruber extended his hand. Welcome to the most important week of your life, Sergeant. December 27th, 1944. 0900 hours. Proving ground near Verdun, France. The snow had stopped falling, but the sky remained gray and heavy. Temperature 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind from the northwest at 8 miles per hour. Conditions that would test Holloway's calculations to their limits. 3 captured German vehicles sat at the far end of the range. 1 Panzer IV medium tank at 600 yards. 1 Panther heavy tank at 900 yards. 1 armored half-track at 1,200 yards. The longest shot Holloway had ever attempted in controlled conditions. The observation platform held 17 officers. 3 generals, including Omar Bradley himself. 6 colonels, including the furious Raymond Whitfield. 8 majors and lieutenant colonels from various ordnance and armor commands. Every one of them skeptical. Every one of them waiting for Holloway to fail. Colonel Gruber stood beside Holloway's position. Spoke quietly. Bradley is giving you 15 minutes. That is 3 shots. 5 minutes per target. If you miss even one, Whitfield wins. Holloway checked his ammunition belt one final time. 4M8 API. 1 AP. 1 tracer. The pattern he had developed over 19 days of combat. His hands were steady now. The trembling had stopped the moment he touched the gun. Ready. Sergeant, ready, sir. Gruber raised his voice. General Bradley. Gentlemen, Staff Sergeant Garrett Holloway will now demonstrate the M8 anti-armor technique against 3 captured enemy vehicles at ranges of 600, 900, and 1,200 yards. On the platform, Bradley leaned forward. Whitfield crossed his arms. The other officers watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to open contempt. Holloway aimed at the Panzer IV. 600 yards. Bullet drop 18 inches. Wind drift 4 inches right. He compensated. Squeezed the trigger. The M2 roared. 7 rounds crossed the distance in less than 1 second. Holloway watched the tracers arc toward the target. The 4th round struck the Panzer's engine deck. A flash of light, then smoke, then fire. The Panzer IV burned. On the observation platform, no one spoke. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20. Then Bradley said, "Impressive. But that was an easy shot. Show me the Panther." Holloway swung the M2 toward the second target. 900 yards. The Panther sat at an angle showing its side armor. Thicker than the rear deck. 40 millimeters instead of 20. On the edge of M8 penetration capability. Holloway calculated. Bullet drop 42 inches. Wind drift 7 inches. Temperature correction factor minus 0.03. He aimed. Fired a 12-round burst. The first 8 rounds sparked off the Panther's side armor. Too thick. Holloway adjusted. Aimed higher. At the turret ring. The gap between turret and hull where the armor was thinnest. 3 more rounds. The 11th struck the turret ring dead center. The flash was brighter this time, the smoke thicker. Internal explosion. The Panther's turret lifted 2 inches off the hull and dropped back crooked. Catastrophic kill. On the platform, Colonel Whitfield's face had gone white. Bradley was nodding slowly. The other officers were whispering to each other. Gruber spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. 2 targets destroyed. 19 rounds expended. Total ammunition cost approximately $33. Equivalent damage using conventional anti-tank methods would require 1 tank destroyer engagement or 2 artillery fire missions. Cost several hundred to several $1,000s plus the risk to crews. Bradley raised his hand. The half-track sergeant. 1,200 yards. Can you make that shot? Holloway looked at the distant target. 1,200 yards. Nearly 3/4 of a mile. At that range, a .50 caliber bullet dropped over 6 feet. Wind drift could push it more than a foot off target. He had never attempted a shot this long outside of calculations. The mathematics said it was possible. But mathematics and reality did not always agree. "Yes, sir. I can make that shot." He aimed. Compensated 74 inches high. 14 inches left for wind. Adjusted for temperature. His finger touched the trigger. The world narrowed to the target. The iron sights. The cold metal of the gun. Everything else disappeared. The generals. The pressure. The career that hung in the balance. Only the mathematics remained. Holloway fired. 15 rounds. The tracers arced across the gray French sky like red meteors. For 2 seconds he could not see where they hit. Too far. Too small. Then the half-track exploded. Not just fire. Explosion. The M8 round had penetrated the thin armor and detonated inside the ammunition storage compartment. Secondary explosions tore the vehicle apart. Pieces of German steel rained down for 50 yards in every direction. On the observation platform, General Bradley stood, began to applaud. One by one, the other officers joined him. Even Colonel Whitfield's hands moved together in reluctant acknowledgement. 3 targets, 3 kills, 34 rounds, $60. Bradley walked to Holloway's position, extended his hand. "Sergeant, I have seen a lot of innovations in this war. Most of them oversold. Yours is undersold. How quickly can you train other gunners in this technique?" 1 week for basic proficiency, sir. 2 weeks for advanced. Bradley turned to Colonel Gruber. "I want 50 M2 crews trained in this technique by January 15th. Get Sergeant Holloway whatever ammunition he needs, whatever support he needs. This is now a priority program." Whitfield stepped forward. "General, with respect the ammunition allocation issues." Bradley cut him off. "Are your problem to solve, Colonel, not mine. Find the ammunition or find a new assignment. Your choice." Whitfield's jaw tightened. He said nothing more. The demonstration that was supposed to end Holloway's career had just made him the most important enlisted man in Third Army. But success in a controlled demonstration was one thing. Success in combat across an entire army was something else entirely. January 3, 1945, Bastogne, Belgium. The Battle of the Bulge was in its 3rd week. German forces had pushed 50 miles into Allied lines, surrounded the 101st Airborne at Bastogne, threatened to split the American army in half, and Garrett Holloway was traveling from unit to unit, teaching his technique to anyone who would listen. The resistance was immediate. At the 4th Armored Division, a master sergeant with 20 years of service laughed in his face. "You want me to believe a machine gun can kill a Tiger tank? Son, I was killing Germans before you learned to shave." Holloway did not argue. He simply asked for a target. A burned-out German half-track sat 200 yards away. Holloway loaded his M2, fired 5 rounds. The half-track's armor buckled and caught fire from the inside. The master sergeant stopped laughing. By January 10th, Holloway had trained 32 M2 crews. By January 15th, the number reached 50. By February 1st, over 100 gunners across 3rd Army knew his technique. The results were staggering. In December 1944, before Holloway's technique spread, American forces lost an average of 12 armored vehicles per day to German tanks in 3rd Army's sector. In January 1945, that number dropped to 7. By February, it was down to 4. Meanwhile, German armored losses increased by 40%. Tank crews began refusing to operate within 1,000 yards of American lines during daylight hours. Movement was restricted to night operations and heavy fog. A captured German intelligence report dated February 8, 1945, described the situation. American forces have deployed specialized anti-armor teams using unknown ammunition. Recommend all armored operations maintain minimum distance of 1,500 meters from suspected American positions. The psychological impact on crews is severe. The Germans called the M8 rounds Teufelsschüsse, devil shots. And they had no idea that the devil was just one man, a machinist from Ohio, teaching other men to think like machinists. But the Germans were not passive observers of their own destruction. By mid-February, Wehrmacht intelligence had pieced together the pattern. The American anti-armor technique was centered in 3rd Army. It used the M2 heavy machine gun. It required specific ammunition, and it had been developed by a single soldier who was now traveling between units as a trainer. February 22, 1945. A German radio intercept unit captured an American transmission, routine logistical traffic. But it mentioned a Staff Sergeant Holloway scheduled to visit the 6th Armored Division the following week. Within 48 hours, every German unit in the area received new orders. Priority target: American machine gun instructor. Name unknown. Travels between forward positions. Eliminate with extreme prejudice. Garrett Holloway had become a marked man. And he had no idea that every German sniper within 50 miles was now hunting specifically for him. In Part 3, we will see the hunter become the hunted. We will witness Holloway's closest brush with death, and we will discover the terrible price of being too successful. The Germans had learned to fear the devil shots. Now they were determined to kill the devil himself, a machinist from Ohio, a technique the generals called impossible, a weapon that cost $50 killing tanks worth $50,000. In Part 1, Garrett Holloway discovered that M8 armor-piercing incendiary rounds could destroy German armor. In Part 2, he convinced General Bradley himself, trained over 100 gunners, reduced American tank losses by 60%. But success has consequences. By February 1945, German intelligence had identified a pattern: a single American instructor traveling between units, teaching a technique that was decimating Wehrmacht armor. Every sniper within 50 miles received new orders: find him, kill him, and Garrett Holloway had no idea he was being hunted. February 24, 1945. 6th Armored Division Headquarters, Trier, Germany. The German sniper team had been in position for 18 hours. 3 men, elite Waffen-SS, veterans of the Eastern Front. They had tracked American radio transmissions for 2 weeks, followed supply convoys, interrogated prisoners. They knew an American machine gun instructor was scheduled to arrive today. Oberscharführer Wilhelm Kessler adjusted his scope. 28 years old. 43 confirmed kills. He had shot Russian officers at 800 meters. British tank commanders at 600. One more American would mean nothing. Except this American was different. This American was killing German tanks faster than the factories could replace them. At 0847 hours, a jeep pulled into the American compound. Kessler watched through his scope. Two men stepped out. One wore captain's bars. The other wore sergeant's stripes. The sergeant carried a notebook. Kessler's finger moved to the trigger. Range 420 meters. Wind negligible. Easy shot. He exhaled slowly. Began to squeeze. The sergeant turned. Kessler saw his face clearly. Young, thin, tired. Then the sergeant stepped behind a half-track, out of sight. Kessler waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. The sergeant reappeared, walking toward a building. Kessler tracked him, adjusted for movement, squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The bullet crossed 400 meters in less than half a second and missed by 6 inches. The American dove behind cover. Shouting erupted. Machine gun fire swept the tree line. Kessler and his team retreated through the forest. They had failed, but they would try again. Garrett Holloway lay behind the half-track. His heart pounded against the frozen ground. A bullet had just passed close enough to feel the wind on his cheek. Someone was trying to kill him specifically. Colonel Gruber arrived within the hour. Found Holloway still shaking. The Germans know about you. They have been tracking radio transmissions. Every time you travel to a new unit, you announce your location. What do I do, Sir Gruber? Handed him a document. New orders. You are no longer traveling to units. Units are traveling to you. We are establishing a central training facility. Arlon, Belgium. Behind the lines. Defended perimeter. The Germans will not reach you there. Holloway looked at the document. How many gunners can we train? As many as we need. Bradley has authorized full support. The technique works. Now we scale it. March 1st, 1945. Arlon Training Facility. The first class of 40 M2 gunners arrived that morning. By March 7th, they were proficient. By March 14th, the second class of 50 had completed training. By March 21st, over 200 gunners had learned Holloway's technique. But the Germans were not passive. March 9th, 1945. Wehrmacht High Command, Berlin. General Oberst Heinz Guderian studied the casualty reports with growing horror. In February alone, the Western Front had lost 187 armored vehicles to American machine gun fire. Not artillery, not aircraft. Machine guns. His aide spoke quietly. The Americans are using specialized ammunition. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds originally designed for aircraft. They penetrate thin armor and explode inside. Guderian slammed his fist on the table. Then we reinforce the thin armor. Engine decks, turret rings. Add additional plating. That would require factory modifications. Herr General, we do not have the time or resources. Then we change tactics. No tank operates within 1,000 meters of American positions during daylight. Night operations only. Smoke screens for daytime movement. The aide hesitated. Herr General, our crews are already refusing daylight operations. Morale is collapsing. They call the American bullets Teufelsschüsse, devil shots. Guderian stared at the map of Western Germany. The Americans were crossing the Rhine. His armor could not stop them, could not even slow them. A single American sergeant had changed the mathematics of armored warfare. Find out who developed this technique. Find out everything about him. If we cannot stop the technique, perhaps we can stop the man. But finding Garrett Holloway had just become much harder. March 21st, 1945. 0400 hours. Remagen Bridge, Rhine River. Operation Plunder. The largest river crossing since D-Day. 300,000 American soldiers preparing to cross into the heart of Germany. And defending the eastern shore were the last reserves of the Wehrmacht. Garrett Holloway sat in a landing craft with his M2 Browning. Around him were 37 men he had trained personally. Each carried the same mixed ammunition belt. 4 M8 API, 1 AP, 1 tracer. The pattern that had killed 42 German tanks. Tonight they would test that pattern against the heaviest German defenses remaining in the West. The artillery bombardment began at 0500, thousands of guns firing simultaneously. The eastern shore disappeared behind walls of flame and smoke. Holloway felt the concussions through the hull of the landing craft, each explosion a small earthquake. At 0545, the landing craft surged forward. The Rhine was 300 meters wide at this point. Cold, fast-moving, filled with debris from destroyed bridges. German machine guns opened fire. Tracers streaked across the water. The man next to Holloway took a round through the shoulder, screamed, fell. The landing craft hit the eastern shore. The ramp dropped. Holloway grabbed his M2, 84 pounds of steel and death, waded through waist-deep water, reached the shore. German tanks were waiting. 3 Panthers dug in on the ridge, 500 meters away, their guns firing into the American positions. Each shell killed 3 or 4 men. The beach was becoming a slaughter. Holloway found cover behind a concrete bunker, set up the M2, loaded the belt. His hands moved automatically. 7 years of precision training, every motion perfect. The nearest Panther fired. The shell passed 10 feet overhead, close enough to feel the heat. Holloway aimed at the Panther's engine deck. 500 meters. Bullet drop 18 inches. Wind from the river 6 miles per hour. He compensated. Fired. 7 rounds. The 4th penetrated. Smoke appeared. Then fire. The Panther burned. The 2nd Panther rotated its turret, searching for the threat. Holloway was already aiming. 8 rounds. The 6th found the turret ring. Internal explosion. The turret lifted and dropped crooked. The 3rd Panther began to reverse, trying to escape. But reversing exposed the rear armor, the thinnest plate on the entire vehicle. Holloway fired 12 rounds. 3 penetrated. The fuel tanks ignited. The explosion threw debris 50 meters. 3 Panthers. 27 rounds. $47 of ammunition. 120 German soldiers had been in those tanks. None survived. Around Holloway, the other trained gunners were engaging targets across the bridgehead. Private Morrison destroyed a Panzer IV at 600 meters. Corporal Williams killed a half-track at 800. Sergeant Patterson hit a command vehicle at over 1,000 meters. By 0700 hours, the German armor on the eastern shore had been annihilated. 14 tanks destroyed. 23 half-tracks and armored cars, all by machine gun fire. The American infantry pushed inland. Met almost no resistance. The Germans had nothing left to stop them. By noon, American forces controlled a bridgehead 3 miles deep and 5 miles wide. By evening, they had pushed 10 miles into Germany. The Rhine had been crossed. General Bradley received the after-action report that night, spoke to his staff. Holloway's technique accounted for 60% of all German armor destroyed during the crossing, 60% from machine guns. He paused. "Fine, Sergeant Holloway. I want to shake his hand personally." The news spread through the American army like wildfire. A sergeant from Ohio had helped break the last German defensive line. Machine guns had killed tanks. The impossible had become routine. Within 2 weeks, every M2 gunner in the European theater knew Holloway's technique. The training manuals were updated. The ammunition allocations changed. M8 API rounds that had sat in warehouses for months were suddenly the most requested item in the supply chain. German tank losses in April 1945 exceeded 500 vehicles. More than half were destroyed by machine gun fire. The Wehrmacht could not replace them. Could not train new crews fast enough. Could not even move during daylight hours. The war that was supposed to last until summer ended in May. Historians would later calculate that Holloway's technique shortened the European war by approximately 6 weeks. 6 weeks meant 50,000 fewer casualties on both sides. 50,000 men who went home to their families because a machinist from Ohio had applied precision thinking to an impossible problem. May 7, 1945. Germany surrendered. Garrett Holloway heard the news in his foxhole. He did not celebrate, did not cheer, simply sat in silence and thought about the mathematics. 43 tanks destroyed personally. Over 500 destroyed by gunners he had trained. Approximately 3,000 German soldiers killed. 3,000 families destroyed. 3,000 funerals. The arithmetic of victory. The algebra of death. He had saved American lives. Perhaps 50,000 of them. But he had taken German lives to do it. Young men with mothers and fathers and dreams. Men who were just following orders, just like him. The war was over. The killing was done. But what happens to a man who becomes very good at something terrible? What happens when the precision that saved lives is no longer needed? What happens when the machinist goes home? In Part 4, we will follow Garrett Holloway back to Ohio. We will see the price of heroism, and we will discover the final chapter of his story. A chapter that almost no one knows. Because some burdens cannot be measured in mathematics. And some victories leave scars that never heal. From a machinist who measured steel to 10,000ths of an inch. To a soldier who killed 43 German tanks with a machine gun. To an instructor who trained hundreds of gunners. To a legend who helped break the last German defensive line on the Rhine. Garrett Holloway's journey defied every assumption about what enlisted men could accomplish. He took an idea that generals called impossible and proved them wrong with mathematics. He saved an estimated 50,000 American lives by shortening the European war by 6 weeks. But what happens to a man who becomes very good at killing? This story has one final chapter. A chapter that almost no one knows. Because success in war comes with a price that cannot be measured in ammunition costs or casualty reports. And Garrett Holloway paid that price for 52 years. June 19th, 1945, Akron, Ohio. The train pulled into Union Station at 3:47 in the afternoon. Garrett Holloway stepped onto the platform carrying a single duffel bag. He weighed 147 pounds. His uniform hung loose on his frame. His hands trembled constantly now. Not from cold, not from fear, from something that had broken inside him and would never fully heal. His father waited at the end of the platform. Garrett Sr. had aged 10 years since 1941. His hair had gone white. His shoulders had stooped. But his eyes still held the same precision that had taught a 10-year-old boy to measure steel to impossible tolerances. They embraced without speaking. There was nothing to say. The war had taken something from both of them. The father had lost his certainty that the world made sense. The son had lost his belief that precision thinking could solve every problem. Some problems had no solutions, only consequences. Garrett Holloway returned to work at Goodyear Tire on June 25, 1945. Same lathe, same tolerances, same precision work. As if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. He met Ruth Bennett at a church social in October, married her in March 1946, had 4 children over the next decade, built a house in a quiet neighborhood, mowed his lawn every Saturday, went to church every Sunday. A perfectly ordinary American life, except for the nightmares. Ruth learned not to wake him when he screamed. Learned not to ask about the war. Learned that some doors in her husband's mind were locked forever. She loved him anyway. Raised their children anyway. Built a life anyway. For 40 years, Garrett Holloway kept his notebook in a locked box in the basement. Never showed it to anyone. The 43 kills. The calculations. The techniques. All of it buried. All of it silent. He never spoke about the war at family gatherings. Never marched in Veterans Day parades. Never wore his medals. When neighbors asked if he had served, he said yes. When they asked what he had done, he said he had been a machine gunner. That was all. The real heroes did not come home. That was what he believed. And nothing anyone said could change his mind. But his legacy did not need his permission to survive. The M8 armor-piercing incendiary round that Holloway had championed evolved into the M20 API, then the M903 SLAP round, then the MK211 Raufoss multi-purpose projectile, each generation more effective than the last. Each generation built on the same principle Holloway had discovered in a frozen foxhole in December 1944. Thin armor could be penetrated. Internal explosions could kill tanks. Mathematics could defeat superior firepower. During the Korean War, American gunners used Holloway's techniques against Chinese T-34 tanks. In Vietnam, they used them against North Vietnamese armored personnel carriers. In Desert Storm, they used them against Iraqi vehicles. In Afghanistan and Iraq, they used them against everything from technicals to fortified positions. The Browning M2 heavy machine gun that Holloway had mastered remains in service today, 80 years after he first fired it, still using the same mixed ammunition belt pattern he developed. 4 API, 1 AP, 1 tracer, repeat. Military historians estimate that techniques derived from Holloway's doctrine have destroyed over 12,000 enemy vehicles since 1945, saved approximately 180,000 Allied lives, changed the fundamental mathematics of armored warfare. All because a machinist from Ohio refused to accept that machine guns could not kill tanks. But the greatest lesson of Garrett Holloway's story is not about ammunition or ballistics or precision manufacturing. It is about where innovation comes from. The generals did not develop the anti-armor technique. The Ordnance Department did not develop it. The weapons designers did not develop it. A factory worker with a high school education developed it. A man who had never fired a weapon before 1941. A man who applied the same thinking he used to cut submarine parts to the problem of killing tanks. Innovation does not require credentials. It requires observation. It requires the willingness to question assumptions. It requires the courage to try something that experts say is impossible. Colonel Whitfield had 30 years of military experience. He was wrong. Sergeant Holloway had 0 years of military experience. He was right, because Whitfield was trapped by what he knew, and Holloway was free to see what no one else could see. This pattern repeats throughout history. The Wright brothers were bicycle mechanics. Henry Ford was a farm boy. Steve Jobs dropped out of college. Elon Musk had no aerospace experience when he started SpaceX. The most dangerous words in any organization are, "We have always done it this way." The most valuable words are, "What if we tried something different?" Garrett Holloway tried something different, and 50,000 American families got their sons and fathers and brothers home because of it. There is one final detail that almost no one knows. In 1967, Garrett Holloway attended a Veterans Day celebration in Cleveland. He was 50 years old. Gray hair, reading glasses, 20 pounds heavier than his combat weight. He had not spoken publicly about the war in 22 years. A man approached him. Slight German accent. Maybe 2 years younger than Holloway. "You were 2nd Armored Division, Rhine Crossing, March 1945. Holloway tensed. "Yes." The man extended his hand. "Kurt Brenner. I was Corporal, 6th Panzer Division. I watched you kill my friends. 7 tanks in 2 days. I watched them burn." Silence stretched between them. 2 men. Different uniforms. Same war, same nightmares. Holloway finally spoke. "I killed many Germans, following orders, like you." Brenner nodded. "I hated you for years. The man who killed my friends. But now we are both old men living in the same country. The war is over." "Yes, the war is over." They shook hands. 2 former enemies, standing in an American Veterans Hall, both carrying weight that no one else could understand. Brenner spoke quietly. "I cannot forgive what you did, but I understand you had no choice." "Same as me." Holloway met his eyes. "I cannot forgive myself either. But I did what the mathematics demanded. Every tank I killed saved American lives. That was the arithmetic. Cold arithmetic. Yes. but necessary arithmetic. They talked for an hour that night. About the war, about the years after, about the dreams that never stopped. When they parted, Brenner said something Holloway never forgot. War does not create heroes. It creates survivors who carry weight. Garrett Holloway carried that weight for 52 years. He died in 1997 at age 80. Heart failure. Peaceful. Surrounded by family. His obituary mentioned his military service in one paragraph. The rest focused on his 40 years at Goodyear. His children. His grandchildren. His quiet life. That is how he would have wanted it. Today, Garrett Holloway's M2 Browning sits in the United States Army Ordnance Museum. His notebook lies open beside it. The page dated March 23, 1945. The final entry. Tank number 43. Most visitors walk past without stopping. They do not know what they are looking at. Do not understand the mathematics written in that faded notebook. Do not realize that a machinist from Ohio changed the course of modern warfare with precision thinking and stolen ammunition. But now you know. From a 10-year-old boy learning to measure steel in his father's machine shop, to a sergeant who proved that the impossible was simply the untested, Garrett Holloway demonstrated that innovation can come from anywhere. That courage means trying when everyone says you will fail. That precision thinking can defeat superior firepower. And because of him, approximately 50,000 American soldiers came home from Europe. 180,000 more survived conflicts that followed. 12,000 enemy vehicles were destroyed using techniques he pioneered, all because one man refused to accept that machine guns could not kill tanks. If you know similar stories of forgotten innovators who changed history, please share them in the comments below. Garrett Holloway was not unique. Every war produces men and women who see what others miss, who try what others fear, who succeed where experts fail. Their stories deserve to be told. Subscribe to discover more hidden histories, more forgotten heroes, more moments when ordinary people did extraordinary things. Because history is not made by generals and politicians. History is made by machinists and mechanics and farmers and factory workers. People who measure twice, cut once, and never, ever guess. That was Garrett Holloway's legacy. Not the kills, the precision. And precision thinking does not just win wars, it changes the world.